every day, the work day about this time, we like to take a look at the verse of the day from the Bible app. Today's verse is Galatians 2:20. Paul is stating to the Galatians that I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. You know, first of all, just a side note, when it comes to like a scripture like that, it's just so profound and so succinct, and just so packed full of like truth. It's just, to me, that's part of the evidence that God inspired the scriptures. It's just so good. It's just so like put together and so it's got like a continuum through the rest of the scriptures. But here you go. I guess when it comes to this verse, there are certain things in our life that can either define us or they change us from that moment on for the rest of our lives. Now, a lot of times it can be bad things, you know, that change us for the rest of our lives. It can be like a car wreck, and it, you know, changes the way that you, I don't know, think about things when you're in traffic, or you're nervous now every time you drive. It could be some type of sickness or illness that you have recovered from, and now you just have a much more appreciation for good health. But there are good things that happen too also that can change your life forever. It could be like meeting a certain person, right? Whom just they're talking to them or having a relationship with them has changed you a lot. It could be an experience, you know, like skydiving or bungee jumping, something like that. That's from that moment on, you became a different person, you know. I don't know what your moment is, or moments, more than likely, that you've had in your life that have basically like turned the rudder a bit or a lot on like if your life were like a voyage on an ocean vessel on a ship. You know, there's events that kind of turn that rudder or change the direction in which you're going, the way that you think. Paul is talking about something that changed his life, and he knows what he's talking about. And so he's not just being like poetic here. You know what I'm saying? He's not just trying to make words sound nice. Paul never tried to make words sound nice. This is like the fact that there was a point in time where something happened, and it's changed him from that point forever. And he's trying to emphasize what that is. Now, Paul says, I have been crucified with Christ, you know, therefore it's no longer I who live, but Christ in me. That changed him. That pretty much changed his life, the direction of his life, the momentum of his life, his purpose in life. It changed everything about his life. Now, here, I guess kind of the irony is that when Paul says, I've been crucified with Christ, it talks about he no longer lives, but Christ in him. If anyone is going to be able to talk, right? If anyone's going to be able to use living and dying as part of the analogy for their life, Paul can do that. Now, because if you remember, Paul, during his, read the book of Acts, Paul's life began to change, we believe, at the stoning of a disciple named Stephen. And at that time, Saul's name was Paul. It wasn't Paul at the time, it was Saul. And Stephen was like a second generation disciple of Christ who had been preaching the gospel, and was caught and captured by some of Paul's men who ever worked for him, and they got him, they surrounded him, and they stoned him to death. And that's when Stephen said, I see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of God. And it says that they took his cloak, that they took the clothes from this dead man, and they placed them at the feet of Saul. And then that's when Saul left from there to Damascus and became Paul. And Paul had a traumatic event happen to him when he met Jesus on the road to Damascus. So Paul is a person who's much acquainted with death. He has watched the process many times in which a person is completely healthy, and then that person being tortured, stoned, hit, knocked down, whatever, until life leaves their eyes. So he's familiar with this, with the transition from one to the other, with no doubt. If anybody is, he is, because he's done it many times. So when Paul says, I am crucified with Christ, I no longer live, but Christ in me, Paul was able to watch and be very conscious of the death. And that's what Christ is doing with you and with me. Because maybe we weren't, we weren't murderers and killers of Christians before we came to Christ. But that moment that we met Jesus should have been, and is a turning, well, it is. If you're a Christian, it's not should have been. It's just, it is the turning point for your life. Everything goes back to that point. Everything goes back to that decision. Everything you think about, you're motivated, or happy, or excited, or scared, or happy. Everything in your life now, goes back to that point, because it's from that point that you became something new. You became a new creature in Christ, as Paul says in 2 Corinthians, right? Now, Paul says this took place because he lived a life in the flesh, which meant that he did what he felt he wanted to do most of the time, and gratified himself with money, popularity, whatever it was that he wanted. That's what he got. But he says he no longer lives within this physical realm. This is not his influence is no longer the circumstances around him or the physical things that he can see, touch, taste, hear, and smell. Nature. He says, because I don't live in the flesh, I now live by faith in the Son of God. And so Paul is saying that, hey, something has changed me a lot. And it wasn't a physical circumstance. It wasn't like another person necessarily, excluding Jesus, of course. It wasn't his job. It wasn't getting married. It wasn't having kids. It wasn't a circumstance at work. It wasn't a degree he earned. Paul has seen and been through a lot in his life. He's very smart. He's educated. He's a Roman citizen. He's a Pharisee. I mean, this guy is a Renaissance man before the Renaissance existed. So he is, and he is keenly aware of the difference between who he is now and who he was then. But he says it's not because, he's being very clear, it's not because of just something temporal or fleshly or carnal. What I mean by that, it's not about this world. There's something else, and it's we would say maybe it's out there, it's spiritual, or I'm not sure how you articulate what he's saying, but basically now he lives a different life, not because of certain situation he's been in. He lives a different life because he now has placed his faith in Jesus Christ. He's placed his faith in Jesus Christ, and he has changed and continues to change because of that. And this earth is no longer his main concern. His main concern is that which is in the spiritual realm. So for us and you and your friends and family who know Jesus, we can definitely catch a glimpse and know what Paul is talking about here when we say that we live in a spiritual place because of our faith in Jesus. And I mentioned it the other morning, like, I don't know, several mornings ago, but I thought about it again this week. So when we talk about our faith and the faith that we have in Jesus, we need to make sure that our faith is in Jesus and that our faith is not in our faith. And what I mean by that is, maybe we come from a family of parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and on down the line were believers and Christians. Maybe we come from an extended family and cousins and nieces, nephews, and all that kind of stuff who all go to church and maybe even go to the same church for some people for years. And so, like, yes, that church life, that Christian life has proven and has been tested by time and can be depended on and is a good thing. And so because of that, sometimes we can have faith in our faith. We have faith in our faith because, it's been a part of our lives. It's been a part of our history. It's a part of our lineage. But we have to, circumvent the faith in our faith and have faith in Jesus. It's good that you may have a life like that and have a legacy of Christendom and church going and all that kind of stuff. That's not bad. It's a great thing. But oftentimes we can lean more into something like that than we can Jesus himself. We need not ever forget that he is the source and he is our resource for everything. And so even though our past has been good to us and has been momentous and has been a good way to find direction and purpose, the bottom line is our faith has to be in Jesus himself. Our conversation and our experience needs to be with Jesus himself. And Paul is being very clear about that. His faith is in Jesus. He hasn't just become a good person, right? He hasn't said, you know what, I'm turning over a new leaf and I'm going to be better and I'm not going to kill people. I'm going to be nicer to people. That's not his deal at all. He's a changed person, not because of he just decided to be good or whatever. He's a changed person because he had an encounter with Jesus Christ, the Son of God, post-resurrection, and realized that he needed God, and that God called him to missions. So, those are just some thoughts for today. Hope you guys have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon.